Now let's talk about variables. Okay, so this is a method and this is a method. Where are the variables now? These are called variables. These are called variables. What is the syntax of variable? A variable syntax is data type, variable name, and value. Okay, so this is the syntax of variable: declaration and initialization. Okay, this is the syntax. So in single statement we are declaring and initializing the variable. Okay, so to take an example, int id equal to 101. Okay, 101. This is one way of declaring and initializing the values. Now let's talk about this one, int id. So this we can call declaring a variable. Why we only call it as declaring a variable? Okay, the reason is we have not initialized any value for the id. We have not assigned any value for the id, so it's nothing but we just declared it. Okay, and when you declare something, there is no memory is going to be allocated. Okay, usually there is no memory will be allocated. You just declared it. When you say id equal to some 200, now the id will be having the value 200. So if you see this particular statement, so the declaration and initialization is happening at single statement. Okay, so that's the reason we can call it as declaring and initializing in a single statement. And this is called declaring at one point and initializing at another point. For example, int pin code. Okay, and here pin code equal to 200. Okay, so first the student class object is created. When I say student object dot display, and the flow comes to here, and pin code is assigned to 200 and the value is printed. Okay, so it's called declaration, and here we are initializing and the same we are printing it, whether you print or not. So it doesn't matter, we just initializing the things here. Okay, that you need to understand. So that's about a variable or declaring a variable. So first of all, what is the use of variable and why do we need to use a variable? So that's important, right? Okay, so we know how to declare a variable, and we also know how to initialize a variable, and there are different ways initializing and declaring and initializing a single statement, and declaring somewhere and initializing somewhere. That's another way. And let's talk about what is a variable, why do we need to use it, and why do we need to create it. Okay, so let me give the definition. Variables are used to store some values. Variables are used to store some values. That's well and good. If you see any variable, we are using some value to assign it. Okay, basically each variable are storing some values. Okay, if it is an integer variable, it will be storing the numbers. If it is string variable, it is storing the sequence of characters. If it is a character variable, it stores a single character. If it's a boolean variable, it stores a either true or false. Okay, so basically variables are used to store some values. That's fine. No, if I can use id equal to 101, it will be sufficient, right? Why do I need to use int here? Why do I need to use int here? Okay, what is the use of this int? And I say this int is a data type. Okay, what is the use of this data type here? Okay, now I say variables are used to store some values. Now a variable, what data it has to store? When I say this statement, immediately we'll be getting some questions, right? First thing is what a variable can store. It's a number, sequence of characters, or a character, or a boolean, or some unknown thing. What a variable has to store, and how much a variable can store. Okay, so when I define a variable, okay, what this variable can accept it, what this variable can hold it, right? And now if I take a circle and if I'm trying to insert a square, will it be okay? Will it be fine? If I take a ball in the shape of circle, okay, ball in the shape of oval or in a round shape, okay, so will I able to insert a square inside it? Will not be possible, right? In the same way, what a variable can store it. When I define a variable, what it can store it and how much it can store it. If you take a glass, okay, it has a capacity, right? It can take, it has a capacity. It might take half liter of water or a full 1 liter of water. If you take a glass, it just has a capacity, right? In the same way, variable also have a capacity. Okay, so what data it can store and how much data it can store will be defined by the data type. Okay, this is very important. First thing is variables are used to store some values. So when I say variables are used to store some values, what values it stores and how much data it can store. These are the two questions we are getting. Okay. So these two questions are answered by the data type. So data type says it is a integer variable, so it can only accept numbers. It says string variable, so it can only accept sequence of characters. It's a boolean variable. It can only accept either true or false. Okay, at the same time, data type also answer how much data this particular variable can hold it. Okay, so by defining the integer, it can hold a number which is of 2 power 32 till 2 power 30 minus 2 power 32 to plus 2 power 32. In till this range, this integer can hold the number. So if you are giving a number beyond the 2 power 32, integer cannot hold it. Okay, so that's about variables. Let's talk about the data types. Okay, we already seen defining a variable with some data type, and we assign some values to that, and we also accessed those values in the main method as well as in the display method, right? Let's talk about the data types. Okay, so there are two kinds of data types. One is primitive data types and one is reference data types. Okay, so this byte, short, int, long, float, double, char, boolean, or call it as primitive data types. Okay, as I said, each data type will be having certain range, minimum value and maximum value. And each data type, when you are defining a variable with integer, its default value is 0. Okay, when you're defining a boolean variable, its default value is 5, even though you don't assign any value to it. So each variable will be having a default value. So these are the default value. Okay, and some examples how to use a variable. And coming to bits, what is this? Okay, so as I said, when you say int a equal to 10, okay, in the memory, so there is a space allocated for you. There is a space allocated for you. int a equal to 10. When you say this one, so this is the memory. In the memory, okay, there is a space allocated for to store this 10, to store this 10, and this 10 is referred by whom? It is referred by a, okay. And you need to remember it's a stack memory. Memories are two types. One is stack memory, one is heap memory. You can note down somewhere. Memories are two types. One is stack memory and another one is heap memory. So variables are stored in the stack memory. Okay, it's not so important, but still you should know it. Now this 10 is stored in the memory, okay, and it is taken a part of the memory. If you see it, when I say this entire bigger square, I can call it as memory, and this small square, I can, I can say it some space which is allocated for the for storing value 10. Okay, some memory is part of a memory is allocated for storing 10, right? Fine. And how much memory it has allocated in the memory, in the complete memory. Let's say I'm having 4 GB of RAM. Okay, so in that memory, in my complete memory, how much memory it has taken? This int a equal to 10. Okay, so this, to define this value 10, how much memory it has taken? Okay, so how much memory it has taken, you can see here. So integer occupies 32 bit. Okay, it is taken 32 bit, 32 bits it has taken. Okay, just to store a value 10, it has taken 32 bits. Okay, if I define a variable byte b equal to byte sum equal to bit equal to some 5. Okay, so in the same way, when I say this one, there will be memory allocator for storing this 5, and that will be referred by bt, right? That would be referred by bt. Okay, perfect. And how much memory it has taken? Byte will take only 8 bits. Am I right? You can say it here, 8 bits. Okay, so this, every data type will be having certain memory allocated for it. Okay, if you say integer, it gonna take 32 bits in the memory. If I say long, it's gonna take 64 bits in the memory. If I say byte, it will be taking 8 bits in the memory. Okay, now let's say to store value 10 or 5. Okay, so I need byte is more than enough, right? It's this value 10, it's between minus 128 and plus 127. Okay, so it's more than enough. If I want to define a variable with value 10, I can go with byte. Okay, so it's only take 8 bits. It's gonna take only 8 bits. If I use for example, if I use int or long, it's going to take, let's say if I use long, it's going to take 64 bits just to store a value. It's going to take 64 bits. Okay, if you see the long range, you can see, I can't read it at all. Okay, it's such a big number. Okay, so when your number is so big, okay, when your number is so big, okay, when you are defining some a billion or trillion value, so that time you can use long. Okay, just to define value 10. Okay, even byte is sufficient, you can go with the byte. Okay, so these small things are very important. May not be in the automation, but it will be very important in the writing an application. Okay, so that particular application will be used by so many people and so many objects created. Okay, and memory is very important in the application development. If you use for simple value to store, let's say to store a value 10, if you use long, it's going to take a 64 bits. It's a very huge thing. Okay, it's going to take a part of 64 bits in your memory. Okay, so it's very important. Okay, whatever what is your value and which is the right data type, you need to pick it up. What is your value? If it is a number, and what is that number? If it is a 10, go with the byte. If it is some no, it is 32,767. The range is minus 32,768 to 32,767. Let's say if you are going to use a 30,000, okay, go with the short. Okay, if you are going to use beyond the 32,767, go with the integer. Okay, what is your value and which is the right data type for you? Okay, if it is a boolean, there is no option, go with the boolean. If it is a character, there is no option, go with the character. And if it is a number, there are multiple options: byte, short, int, long. Go with the any of the data type based on your value. And float and double are to define values, to define the floating values. Let's say float a equal to 10.5. Okay, if you want to define any number, beyond the decimal, let's say floating point numbers. Okay, so we can use float. When you use the float, you have to define with f. Okay, so again, float is 32-bit. Okay, if you want to define a bigger number in the a bigger number which a float cannot afford, you can go with the double, d equal to some 100, something like this. Okay, when you are defining a floating point number and float cannot accommodate that, then you okay, then you can go with the double. So that's about primitive data types. And reference data type is nothing but dog equal to new dog is nothing but it's a class name. It's, if you can see it and if you can understand it, here I'm creating an object, right? Here I'm creating an object, and this object is referred by dog, right? So if you can see here, I have created a student object and I'm calling the method with the student object name, student class object. This is the object name. Okay, so this student object, we can also call it as a reference, you know reference variable. And this student class, we can call them as student class data type or reference data type. Okay, let's talk about this one. When I say id, equal to 101, and data type is integer, you are saying. Okay, id data type, you are saying integer. When I say address, whose data type is string. In the same way, when I say student object, whose data type is student class. Okay, so what is the data type of student object? It's a student class. So in a object declaration, this is called a reference variable or an object name, and this is called a reference data type, or you can also simply call it as data type. Okay, so that's about a reference data type. Okay, and one more thing here, int xyz equal to 20. Okay, okay, one more. Yeah, I was done with the data type. I'm done with the data types. So you can go through this presentation or this document once again and note down all these values, all this information, and read it once again. Okay, so let's come back to the variables. Like data types, which is primitive data types and reference data type. In the same way, variables are two types. Okay, one is local variables and instance variables. Okay, let's talk about instance variables. If you define a variable outside a method and inside a class, please note down, if you define a variable outside the methods but inside a class, that are called instance variables. If you define a variable inside a method that is called local variables. The scope of instance variables are throughout the class. The scope of instance variables are throughout the class. So once you define an instance variable here, you can use this variable in any method. You can use this variable in any method. Okay, let's. I can use this variable name in the display method. Print the same. I can use it here. Okay, so instance variables, let me talk about once again. If the variable is defined outside a method, sorry, if a variable is declared, yes, outside a method, but inside a class, we can call them as instance variables. If a variable is declared inside a method, we can call them as local variables. And instance variable scope are throughout the class. You can use anywhere in the class. You can use in a number of methods. Okay, and local variable scope are limited to this method. Okay, I define a variable xyz, and I cannot use that xyz beyond that method. Okay, I cannot use this xyz in the method print because this is declared in the display method, and it is local to display method only, right? So I cannot use this particular xyz variable, which is a local variable, and I can only use that variable only inside this method. Okay, that's one thing. One more point you need to observe is, you can see here, if I define a local variable and I have not given any value to it, okay, it says that this local variable xyz may not have been initialized. It's a compilation error. It says compilation error. When you are defining a local variable, make sure you assign some value to that before using it. Okay, the reason behind that is local variables doesn't have any default value. Only instance variables will be having the default values. I define a variable pin code and I have not defined any value, even though I can able to use it here. The reason is that the instance variables will be having the default values. If it is the integer, it will be 0. If it is a boolean, it is false. Okay, so that's about that. And when you are you can declare a local variable without any default value, but when you are using it, make sure it is assigned some value. Okay, make sure when you are before using it, you make sure it has assigned some value. Either you can assign like this, or you can directly assign like this. Okay, now what is the value, what is the answer for this? I define xyz equal to 20 and I change it to 10. Now if I print it, I'll be getting the value 10 only. I will be getting the value 10 only. Okay, that's one thing. And I cannot change this value. I cannot access this value or change this value in any other method outside this display. Okay, so as it is a local variable and it is local to only display method, and I cannot use this particular variable in any other method. That's one point you need to remember about the local variable. Now let's talk about, so this is id equal to 101. Okay, id equal to 101. I am changing it to 200. Okay, and I'm printing this value, id here, and after calling the display dot print, I'm calling. Now when I call the display, okay, so pin code will be 200, id will be 200, int xyz is 20, and that is changed to xyz as 10. Now when I print xyz here, I will be printing 10 here. When I print the pin code value is 200 right now in the memory. When I print name, the value of the name is Sudhir. Okay, and right now the id value is 200. Initially it was 101. In the display method I change it to 200, and when I call the print method, I can print the name as Sudhir. And what is the value of id? The id value got changed in the display method. Okay, and now if I print the id, it will be 200. Let's see this one. The last value should be 200. Okay, So that means you can change the instance variable at any point of time. Once you change the instance variable, that value will be used until it got changed later. Okay, let's say so initially the value was 101. Okay, in the display method this particular value got changed, right? It got changed to 200, and in the print method I'm using that one, so it's printed as 200. Okay, so that's about variables and data types. Okay, so what is the assignment for you now? What is the assignment? So you can go to this document, variables and data types, that is first assignment, and go to my video once again, that is the second assignment. And I have told there are multiple data types: integer, boolean, character, all those stuff. And at the same table, I also give an example how to use those data types in the variable declaration and initialization. Okay, please go through the table once again and write a class by defining, by defining all the variables with the different data types, and create a method display and print all those values here, all those variable values here. Okay, so that is your third assignment. I am done with the class. Any questions? So all my videos